Hey.
I'm actually thrilled. You know, this is a very serious title, and it's a serious topic. But in my podcast, I actually aim to make discussing mental health fun, enjoyable, and sometimes even funny. So we're going to go for that here, right?
Sounds good.
Okay. And it's an honor to have you all.
Thank you.
Now, Jen, when we did our pre-call, you said that there is a perception that advertising and mental health can't go together, that this is seen by many as a binary choice, success in advertising or my mental health. I'm not in advertising. Is that true? And share, because your firm and several others have done really interesting work. You've actually got data around this, around the state of mental health in the industry among creative teams, all teams, strategy teams. I'd love you to talk about that. And then, is it true, your mental health or your success in advertising?
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, Aaron and I had an event on Worldwide Mental Health Day, and prior to that event, I did a bowl on Fishbowl about mental health. And one of the questions, one of the things that came up is someone said, mental health or advertising, choose one. And we were expected to respond as being on the bowl. And I mean, it really is a very interesting question in our industry. I mean, we're a creative industry. We're expected to work nights and weekends at some places. And the demand on our time and our resources and our energy is a lot. I think there are some places that are looking to actually actively change this. And I know that, at Berlin-Cameron, we are trying to do something about this. We did a study with Kantar, so it was really nationwide to understand the impact of mental health on the workplace, and 55% of people feel that the workplace affects their mental health. At Berlin-Cameron, it was 80%, and that made me feel awful. So we are putting lots of different things into place in order to make sure that they know about all the resources available. One of the things that came out of the Kantar study is that 70% of people don't use any of the resources available to them that are there to support them for mental health. And working at WPP, we actually have an app that answers right away, a phone call that answers. I actually did both things to try it out to make sure that there was a person at the end of the line. And we have these resources, but no one's talking about them. And I think that's a tremendous problem. We need to reduce the stigma of using these. We need to be talking about them. And we really need to be talking about our own issues too, to make people feel more comfortable talking about them themselves. I mean, that was a really huge part of the data, is that 40% of people think that if they admitted to a mental health or wellness issue, that it would actually damage their career. And that is really not true. So we as leaders need to become vulnerable. We need to open up and actually share and make them feel more comfortable in sharing these issues so that we can create a safer place for all.
I'd love to see a show of hands, and if you feel uncomfortable sharing, when Jen said that, mental health or advertising, how many of you thought that felt true to you?
Wow. Oh my God, yeah. So bad.
Okay.
We've got a bit of work to do.
Yeah. Jason. Aaron. Oh, no, you're not Jason. I'm sorry, Aaron.
All good.
See, I get nervous too. So you're open about your OCD, and I love that you are. You're public about it. You're an advocate. I don't think your career has suffered, but you waited a long time to sort of come out, and I'm curious why you decided to be public, how it changed your leadership once you became public about your OCD and your mental illness. And, now that you're out, what's it like as a leader in advertising?
Yeah, I mean, for me, ever since I was a really little kid, I had these intrusive thoughts about, violence and self-harm and harming kids. And sometimes I could have like hundreds or thousands a day. So because the nature of all the thoughts were so taboo, I just lived in my world in silence for like over 2 decades. And ultimately that takes a toll on you, especially in advertising. I have my own creative shop, and the paradox of like looking and seeming healthy to your team and coming in and trying to be like a positive voice in the room and move work forward and pitch in boardrooms, but then, you know, having really unhealthy behaviors like self-harming and things like that. So after all that, I just decided that I finally Googled violent thoughts online, and that was really scary because it was an admission. Even being a digital agency, I'm like not searching online because it's kind of a recognition. And when I did that, I realized there was this whole world of people, and there was actually this thing called pure OCD, and that OCD was something I probably made fun of as germs and cleanliness, but actually was this completely different disorder than I understood it. And I was like, this is my beginning of my path to getting better myself, but most importantly, this is my opportunity as a person of privilege, as someone who grew up in a middle-class family, as a white male. Like, I am a person of privilege, and like, if I don't know this information, then no one knows this information. And so I thought that's how I could use like branding and design and marketing to try to kind of change that. And so I was very scared to share that with my team. I was very scared to share that with my clients. I thought there'd be a lot of issues, but in the end, it's been a positive experience.
Have any of your intrusive thoughts ever informed creative for you over the years?
It's interesting, like usually you're trying to like push them away because I think we all have like thoughts popping off in our heads all the time. It's just like the ones that give you a tremendous amount of anxiety, and if you try to push those away, usually it snowballs and it gets worse, and then it leads to a lot of debilitating conditions,
Leeann, so you come at this from probably still quite a raw and painful place because your colleague, Greg Smith, who I think you worked with for a long time and had been at your firm as CCO for 20 years, I think I read, and was credited with so much growth and good stuff, committed suicide in April. And I can only imagine the impact this has had on you as a leader, on your company. What do you do as the person in charge after that happens? How do you show up the next day at the office and then change things going forward?
There's really no real answer to that. I will say, when I got that call on Easter Sunday, it was horrifying, and I knew nothing. Like, I didn't know what to do at all. And I was really, really privileged that I just started calling anyone I could think of who might help me learn. And I was really, really lucky to get in touch with some people who had more experience in the area than I did. And the other thing that I was really, really lucky about is that Greg's family wanted to be very forthcoming about what had happened and his struggles and why, and that this was someone who took their own life. And so we were able to be very open with the agency. That, I think, was the greatest gift that we had, because right away it opened up that everybody has stuff they're dealing with. And part of the problem was that if you're not able to be open with it, as you have been, it gets into your own, you can get lost in your own thoughts, and that can be really destructive. And so it was a really great opportunity for us as an agency. We have a really, really wonderful culture at VIA anyway. But it was a great opportunity for us to come together and lean on each other and be really open with each other about who we are as human beings beyond work. And so we did all the things that you should do. We had counselors on site, and we had every kind of counselor you can imagine. Grief counselors and art therapy and music therapy and writing therapy, and we had food and we had community hours, and everybody was allowed to kind of go at their own pace, whether that meant jumping right back into work, which a lot of people chose to do. And we had to understand and be empathetic that that was their way of healing and finding control, versus other people who needed to sit in a chair for 4 weeks and not talk to anyone, and everything in between. So we made room to accommodate everybody and really see and hear one another. And then, coming out of that, now we're 6 or 8 months past that moment, but it's still part of us. We're very, very conscious of making sure we make room for each other, and that we are really trying to see each other. And there are a few people in the agency who have struggled with a lot of different things and sort of came to the forefront during the time of crisis and said, I struggle with addiction, or I struggle with depression, and it's been wonderful that they're open enough to share that. It came from a horrible crisis, but it's allowed us to have a community that's much more supportive of one another. And it's a good reminder also that we're in an industry, as Jen was saying, that, pick advertising or mental health. For us, our culture is so rich and it's so fun and balanced and focused on inspiring people that sometimes even that is pushing too much. Even the fun parts are too much. Mm-hmm. And so we have this thing called Go Do, where I'll stop the agency and we'll go do something to inspire us. Lunchtime dance party,
I have to say, as an introvert, like that would terrify me.
Yeah,
I could not
I get
handle
it.
that. I would be terrified.
I get that.
Me too.
We've also done meditations and balloon sculpture. They all have a message. But this last week, we're in like 4 or 5 pitches right now. It's been an absolutely crazy time. And I did a Go Do in the middle of all of it. And everyone was going to be really pissed off because who wants to stop? Like 5 pitches going on. They're like, come on, Leeann. But my Go Do was intentional because I made everybody stop and do nothing. And I was like, for the next hour, we're doing nothing. Because I could see that in the agency, people's frustration and tension and fear and anxiety and manicness was all at an elevated rate. My own, too. I was feeling very manic, and it was like, let's just take a minute. Mm-hmm. And for an hour, I don't care if you lie on a couch, if you go for a walk, if you go to do a meditation, but there's no work to be done. Just breathe. And I knew that it would help us get through this period. So we're doing things like that where we're just really paying attention.
Incredible.
Jason,
Yeah.
I'm going to read the mission statement on your website,
Sure.
The Lives of Men. You're all about redefining masculinity, which is a wonderful theme of today. And you say, everything we do is rooted in our set of core values. We believe that truth plus transparency equals vulnerability. And I want to zoom out for a sec and say, how does vulnerability create better advertising, better teams? Why should your companies pay to become more vulnerable?
That's $1 million question. I know we didn't plan this, but there's no coincidence that I'm going after Leeann and what she just said and her experience, because I do men's work at its core. And men's work to redefine masculinity, kind of challenge identity and what that looks like going forward. And at the root of that is vulnerability. And I believe that, like it does in all of our lives, vulnerability is the key that unlocks our ability to be authentic and to develop really authentic and nurturing relationships. And likewise in business, right? When you look at the brands that you love and what they do and why they're so memorable is because they're doing something that tugs at your heartstring. And so when you think about, we all know the numbers, right? Like close to 90% of consumers want to do business with brands that they trust and that they know what they stand for. But what I think vulnerability does is that it not only helps inform kind of the external outward-facing product that you see or marketing or advertising, what it does is unlocks the best of the brand from the inside. So again, when you think about building teams and when you think about the way those teams work, you just described something that you kind of alluded to it, but it's so important to add language to, and that is the sense of vulnerability, knowing where we are and how we relate to one another on an emotional level is the recipe, if you will, that unlocks then the product, the creative, the design. So I think it's incredibly important as it relates to advertising. I see a lot of brands doing that very well, but I do want to see more brands to be courageous enough to take that leap of faith and be more vulnerable and open with themselves. Because at the end of the day, vulnerability is an act in a form of leadership, if you will, right? It takes courage and bravery to step out in a way and then allow the world to see you in a way that you don't know what you're going to get in return. And so that is the epitome of leadership, and that is vulnerability in my mind.
You know, it's so funny because I love that you say that, and I was thinking about Wade Davis's daughter's example, and I think there's an allegory in mental health. You know, we have a lot of leaders, really big deal leaders coming out saying, end the stigma, and they're always talking about their cousin, their daughters, their mother who grew up with mental health issues. Can you think of one big-time CEO who has stood up and said, I have depression, I'm anxious? Why do we feel like talking about mental health makes us vulnerable? What are we so scared of? This is for everyone.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, please.
No, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think my work that's where the root of my work lies, right? It's to examine the relationship between, as men, how we have to subscribe and uphold these old notions of masculinity and the relationship between that and then our preponderance of suffering from depression and anxiety and suicide and things like that. So it is important, right? Because you have your CCOs and your CMOs and your CEOs playing at the highest levels of our industries, dealing with pressure from all sides and angles. How are they then taking that pressure and where are they unloading that? And so for me, it's making sure that the linkage is there and that we call language to that, and then start to create spaces where men can have safer spaces, braver spaces to have conversations around that.
And I think, sorry, 1 second, Jen, but I think just building on that, it's not just even creating the language, we have to find ways to celebrate it.
Yeah.
Like to celebrate the fact that you shared your struggles with your team and your clients and today. To celebrate the fact that, someone says, I need help. We just sort of say, oh, that's acknowledged, we've given you the language and the tools, but we have to take it beyond that to celebrate it. CEOs of major corporations have no problem celebrating the fact that they're ADHD.
Right.
So why is this
It's
any
a
different?
thing among entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
It's a thing. Jen, you were going to say something.
I was going to say, when the team actually brought the Berlin-Cameron data to me, one of the things was that you get support from your coworkers. So opening up to a coworker is a way that you can feel better and released. And I thought to myself, well, as the leader, like who am I supposed to talk to? And I actually started to get tears in my eyes and think like how I am so scared on a daily basis, like hiding that, trying to make this a success, and the pressure of that, and the pressure of being a mom, and at the same time, and my husband losing his job in July, and just all of this like weight on my shoulder. And I started, like tears started rolling down my eyes, and the team says, well, Jen, what's wrong? And I said, well, is it okay with you guys if I tell you how I'm feeling and that I haven't been feeling that great recently? Is that going to be too much for you? Like, I was scared that me telling my vulnerabilities would feel like a weight on them. And I think actually it had the adverse effect, that they were able to see me as more human, feel more like they could open up to me as well. And I think, and then me feeling like I didn't have completely no one to talk to as a leader. I mean, they say it's lonely at the top, but because there's no one telling us like who you should talk to or who you can talk to. And I think we as leaders need to be able to share, and then then as a result, the employees will come. And they actually came in droves, like, oh, I just wanted you to know I'm going through something similar. Like, I would love to talk to you about that. And it really started opening up all these really amazing conversations that I never would have thought that I could have.
Yeah, we at Made of Millions, our mental health advocacy charity, we did a campaign earlier this year called Dear Manager, and the idea was kind of level the playing field and put CEOs, C-suite on the same level as junior designers talking about mental health at work. And what I thought was going to be really easy to reach out to people in my network and hit up some C-suite people. The one question I got every single time was, who's doing it first? Or who else is doing it? And it was like just running into wall after wall, like all good people, but like who's gonna do it first? And I'm sitting there like, I can't launch this credibly unless I get some interesting people involved. They have to kind of set this floor for everyone else to participate. Fortunately, Guru from Verizon Media, the CEO, got on board with it and did an 11,000 person or a town hall at Verizon and had Lady Gaga's mom from Born This Way Foundation and me come in and talk about it. And like the feedback just through LinkedIn and everything has been really amazing. But it takes just doing it. And it's scary. And there's a lot of fears around upward mobility. There's fears around perception. There's fears about a board of directors or a client or whatever. So it takes just doing it.
Yeah.
Risk. So before we get to the next question for our group, this is the how-to track. And if anybody has a question that they want to ask their boss or they want to talk about at work, but we have 4 incredible bosses here, or they want to talk about mental health at work, disclosing boundaries, raise your hand. We have a mic runner, and this is your session, and then we'll go back to questions. I think I saw a hand.
Yeah.
You see, you're taking the risk.
Be
I
brave.
love it. You're being brave.
Break the pattern, as
So
we heard
do you want to
before.
stand up? I think there's our mic.
Hi, Maddie.
Oh, wait, hold on. You know what? Here comes
There's some-
your mic.
Hello? Oh my God. Okay. So I've had a few managers before who have said something along the lines of like, you know, kind of separation of church and state, like it's unprofessional to share your personal details at work, like what's going on in your personal life. One time I had a really bad breakup and I just took a sick day. I hadn't taken a sick day all year, and my manager said, well, you know, it's really hard to keep those things separate from work, so just don't share that with anyone that that's what you're doing. So why do you think that is, that people feel that's unprofessional? How can we change that? And do you think there's any truth to it?
Yeah, I've never been, look, I don't know anything but to be vulnerable. And what I found is that the more vulnerable, the more open I am with what's going on in my life, the more I attract the tribe, if you will, the people that I need, the conversations that I need to have. So I think that's because it's just a different generation, right? The generation that kind of has come before us has been more about the bottom line, thinking about the business, and not really making the correlation between the business and the human, right? And the human beings run that business and create the bottom line. And so I think what people like yourself and others and all of us, I think our understanding is that humanness is important in all that we do. And as marketers and as storytellers that are in this room, we're in the people business at the end of the day. We are in the relationship building business, regardless of where you sit along that spectrum. And so I think it's important for us as leaders to understand that, and then for those of us who we lead or those who we lead to understand that we are open forums for those types of conversations, because it's important for all of us going forward.
Yeah, I would add on that, if you have that sort of old school mentality at the top and no vulnerability, what I found is that every corporation is terrified that the managers, like the operators, don't know how to handle this growing conversation. So I think the growing conversation is natural. You're seeing it on social, your friends posting about bipolar or this or whatever, and there's this really big fear at that level that that has to be tackled through like training and education and ongoing, support.
But I would say model the behavior too.
Yeah.
Right? Show what it looks like you did when you opened up. Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. The person was operating out of fear. They didn't know how to deal with you in that personal situation, so they shut it down, probably.
I mean, I think it is important, the point about the managers, to really empower the managers, because everyone is an individual, and everyone has a different style, everyone has different stuff that they're carrying. And so one of the things that we're doing that's come out of this survey is to let the managers be responsible, to let their individual employees say if they need a mental health day, they approve it. If they need to work from home one day, if they decide that working out at lunch is the only way that they can do it, they work out at lunch every day. They leave at 5 if they need to. And it's all about, you just get the work. This is about an individual result. You get the work done, and the manager is able to empower that employee to do whatever the style is that they need to get it done in. And I think, that there is that old school mentality, but I think it needs people like you that are challenging those questions and saying, that's not right. Actually, what you're saying to me isn't right. Work and life are so combined right now, work-life integration, that there is really not a lot of separation. And so for you to challenge those bosses and say, I actually think that I need to be open here, and if this isn't a place that I can be, then I maybe need to consider something else.
Yeah, and recognizing the risk of it, because one of the big pieces of feedback that we've gotten, fair critiques, is people who have been fired for disclosure, or people who have lost upward mobility or promotion opportunities or been overlooked for pitch assignments. That's a real thing.
Which is illegal, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But it's a real thing. So, it's finding that balance. If you feel like you're in a safe enough space to push the conversation, it has to come from the bottom up, because coming from the top down is completely failing everyone.
Well, one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard, but I take it for the mental health conversation, is to reframe your needs in the language of the organization that you work in. So if you're in an organization that just doesn't talk about this kind of stuff, and you like it and you want to stay there, use the language to get your day off in a way that they will understand, even if you're telling a little white lie. Because you may not feel ready to make systemic change. If you're lucky enough to work for one of these people, or you feel like you've got allies, it's different. But I think really understanding what's good for you at the time is also part of mental health.
Yeah.
The other part of it that I think, is the colder part is all of the vulnerability I completely agree with, and I appreciate, being the person who's going to make the change. You also have to be the person who's getting your work done, to your point. You can't have it one way or the other. These two things, if you're going to say you need to see me as a whole person and as a worker, you need to be both the whole person and the worker. And you need to find that. Balance is a bad word. I don't like it. It sort of dilutes both sides. But you have to find that reality so that there is no question about your contribution as well.
But a lot of people who have mental health issues, it's genetic, it's chemical, it has nothing to do with their need for, stress. And trust me, you never know who's struggling. You had a question.
Yes. You guys hear me? I don't know if
Yeah.
She's coming.
Okay.
Just for the live stream.
Yeah. So, trying to think. So, from my history and family, like there's been, I'm very familiar. I'm, deal with my own issues, but people in my family have, and my mom was a social worker, so I'm very familiar with just being very open, talking about your feelings, understanding if someone maybe struggles. Like my brother, I think he deals with a lot of stuff. So I've personally been that person on the sidelines that's able to recognize if someone else is probably going through something. And obviously I wouldn't tell someone that they need to go do something unless they came and confided in me, because it's obviously not my place. But what if you realize someone's in your organization and maybe it's been a stretch where it's just been a lot of negativity, or just they're very down, and it's hard because I'm a bystander, I'm on the sidelines and I'm recognizing it. And maybe if they went and, in their personal time was able to go and confide in a therapist or someone just to talk to, it would help them, because maybe
Is your question about should you
Yeah,
suggest that they get help, or should you talk to a manager?
I think it's hard because how do you do that?
Yeah.
You can't really go and do that because I'm not a licensed professional, or the next person isn't a licensed professional to just jump in and say, hey, I think you need to go get help or talk to someone.
Well,
So
I'd love to hear advice.
I don't know what the right answer is, but I know what we've been doing, and that is, to Jennifer's point, making it available. I mean, we've been really open about resources that are available, whether they're the employee assistance program or specific local programs or individual counselors that we've worked with, or just making my cell phone in every single employee's phone, and it's just 105 people who can call me for whatever. Those are things that we make really clear on a repeated basis. And if we're sort of seeing stuff going on, I'm not a licensed therapist, and we certainly don't have any on staff, but we do have enough people that have sort of dealt with similar issues that they might at least remind someone of what's available to them.
Yeah, I think just asking, are you okay?
Yeah.
Really just to start the conversation between you and the person, and then you'll see how open that is for you to suggest maybe a resource, or, just to show empathy to that person, I think is so helpful. I think so many of us are scared in the workplace to actually ask that question, but it's perfectly okay to ask.
Yeah, and I think, Jen, what you're alluding to is also what kind of culture are you in, right? If you feel like you can't ask that question where you work, then there might be a culture that you might not have noticed that prevents you from doing that or feeling comfortable in doing that. So maybe ask broader questions. Is this environment conducive for us to have this conversation? Does this person know that there are resources in place that come from leadership, from the organization, that can be helpful? But yeah, I agree. I think it starts with asking a lot of questions.
And listening to the
listening,
answer.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's pretty surprising, most people don't understand how their benefits package relates to mental health. So even a simple 30-minute lunch and learn, and really, what is an EAP and how does it work? It's funny, I'll go and talk in these corporations, they'll have HR will also come in and explain the EAP. I was like, this is amazing, I had no idea that you could do this. So part of it's ongoing programming, creating content, having, people come in and speak, and just the culture piece. It can't be like a policy on a shelf. It's got to be part of the dialogue.
It sounds like something powerful that you're saying is that if you have a leader who's open and authentic, and then an HR team that's accessible and gives people actual helpful information, that's a pretty powerful combination.
Yeah, because I think even sharing that information, because other than just like passing the booklet over when they first start, it's really important because you're actually saying, you know what, these things are okay for you to use. Like, and I'm telling you about them, and I am making it okay for you to, you know, be open here. And I think that that's a really nice thing.
Yep.
In the front row.
She's running.
Hello, my name is Sabrina Hart. I'm just curious. So I started working at 18, and now I'm only 21. And so I'm still trying to adjust to life, working, going to school, and still trying to find some way to find some self-recovery. How do you keep balance between those things? How do you still find time to do self-reflection when you have so much going on and, you know, you feel like you're falling apart sometimes?
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I'd
mean,
say for me,
I have a ton to say to that, but I'll pass.
I'd say like anything that makes you present, whatever you find. For me, it's surfing. Like that's my thing. So, you know, it's always finding time to make that happen. But other things that make me present is like playing music and it's just trying to actually carve out a day in which you're available for those things. And even as you like grow through the workplace, my team knows like if there's swell coming, I'm canceling meetings, I'm out, and that's better. That's better for everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
I was going to ask you if you put therapy on your calendar, but you actually put like waves on your calendar. Like,
Yeah.
I'm out.
They all know her name's Ruth. So.
You know, one thing that works for me and that I'm very big on is journaling. And it's something you can do wherever you are at whatever time. And it serves two purposes. One is an immediate release in the moment. And then it's also a piece that you can always reflect back on and really just chart your growth, right? And see where you've been, where you are today, and where you're trying to go. So journaling for me is a very important tool. And then I'll also say that I'm not a religious person, but a spiritual practice of some sort, whether it's meditation, you know, surfing can be a very spiritual practice, but try to find something that serves and feeds that need as well. Because whether we realize it or not, I think we all kind of want to feel a part of something bigger than us. So find that what that is for you and invest in that.
And I think the other thing I would say is give yourself permission to make you the priority. And because that's what you saying, there's a swell coming and I'm out, that makes you the priority. And that, as you say, is better for everyone. It will be better in the long term. And women in particular are really bad at making ourselves a priority. I mean, the statistics around the fact that we don't even take a break to go to the bathroom during the day are like troubling.
It's bad.
So everyone's nodding, but give yourself that permission and then hold yourself to it, because you have to be able to understand you are a priority in order to find whatever spiritual, meditative, present practice you need.
Yeah.
yourself.
And don't wait.
Yes, I love it.
Do it now. You know.
Hello, Brittany Rickett. To the comrade asking the question, one, I would implore you to get a mental health first aid certification.
Yes.
It is free, and we triage cuts, bruises, but rarely do we often take the responsibility of supporting other people. So I would say everyone should do that. But talking about WSE, AP, and just thinking about health outcomes for particularly Black women, women of color, what steps are you taking to make sure that the resources are inclusive and kind of dismantling the bias that a lot of people, particularly from cultures that are very much impacted by the stigma of mental health and access to care? What are you doing within your own organizations to make sure that those resources are inclusive?
Yeah, so speaking of, I'm glad that you brought up the mental health first aid training, because we did that. We offer training for everyone that wanted to take it. And it's 8 hours, you know, it goes by super fast, but you'd be surprised at the tools and the resources that are available to you, not just to you for your own personal care, but also for those that you do kind of, you know, notice that there might be something wrong. It gives you the language and the tools to approach that conversation in a safer way. So by all means, I think that's one thing that we've done. And then just by design, here I am, I'm doing men's work, but I am very intentional about building a team around me that's inclusive, that not just comprise women, but LGBTQ folks, et cetera, because in the work, you have to have that diversity of thought and representation. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think for Made of Millions Foundation, I mean, realistically, it's a few of us just grinding at night making things, self-funded, and we're at that critical moment where we need to build out that board, and we need to really take these steps to scale and reach more people with this information. So a huge part of it is like, how are we building out a medical advisory team that's representative? How are we building out a board of directors that's representative? What about our ongoing content and live series? Like, what does that look like? And so getting into topics of intersectionality and mental health and things like that are super important. And so we're just trying to figure it out.
We should all be giving to Made of Millions nonprofits so
Thanks.
that we can build up that content so it's available for everyone.
And actually, I just had a woman on my show, Dr. Angela Neal Barnett, who is a leader in especially working with Black professionals and anxiety. And if you are looking for a therapist who's culturally competent or who is a person of color, Google her. She links out to many, many organizations where you can find mental health help, with someone who is like you, because that can be important.
It matters.
Angela Neal Barnett, Neal Barnett, Barnett. She's amazing. So we only have a few minutes left. I'm going to take one last question, and then I'm going to ask a question of our panel. So make it a good one. There you go.
Hi, I'm Sam. My question is, I'm very open about struggling with anxiety, but when is the appropriate time to bring it up in the workplace? I'm open with it with my friends, my family, coworkers, but I think my biggest struggle is bringing it up to my creative director, my manager, because I don't want them to see it as, I'm not going to do my job. I'm going to slack off. I'm going to use it as a crutch. So at what point do you bring it? Is it when you accept a job? Like, at what point do you say, hey, this is me, so I'm probably going to act this way sometimes, but this is what I'm struggling with, this is who I am?
I think like you were talking about finding that, you said reality between like maybe a condition or an experience and then, doing good work. I personally would frame it all around an accommodation, because I think that's language that they understand, which can be like, if you know that you have a certain tendency, like if you're thrown in a meeting and you can't ideate on the fly simply because of anxiety, not because you don't have great ideas in your head, something as simple as like asking your manager to come around like 3 hours before the meeting and be like, hey, by the way, we're going to have this like brainstorm about this thing. Like that actually can resolve a lot of that anxiety. Mm-hmm. So there are these little things that you might carve out. You're going to have to probably be in the driver's seat of what those ideas are, and then just float them by, and if you don't get the traction you need, escalate it to HR.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we actually got from Pinterest from the event that we're going to do with all of our incoming employees, and we're doing with all of our employees that we have now, are onboarding interviews where we talk about, all the different styles of work, like how do you actually like to receive feedback? And so hoping that some of these things come up in the very initial meeting with the person so that we're able to accommodate for you as an individual when you join us and we get to know you right then and there, and we're able to make some adjustments for you.
Yeah, I think if you treat it as a fact and not something of judgment, it's a fact. It's a factor of who you are, and then it will impact how you need to work best to get the best out of you. And if you approach it that way and, talk about what it means and what the impact is in terms of stylistically, I would bring it up sooner than later, because it's something that's just factual.
Mm-hmm. And I would just say, I am a hot mess of anxiety and depression. I was in the ER 3 weeks ago for a panic attack, but I'm awesome. It's like I'm really successful, and it's just life. So I think that. And it's hard when you're younger. But I think if it's part of you and it's a gift to your creativity and leadership and empathy, it's going to take time, but you're going to see it as a gift if you're in touch with it. Okay, last question. That was a great question. Thank you. I want you to tell us in the audience the one thing that you are proud of that you've implemented to make a more mentally healthy workplace for your team. Or the one thing that you plan on doing in 2020 to make your company a more mentally healthy workplace?
I'm personally proud that I have allowed us to do this research and really get to understand that it's actually not just a systemic problem within the overall world in our industry, but it's a problem that we have internally, and trying to find ways in which to change it internally through getting to know everyone individually and really focusing on them and adapting to an environment that makes them feel like they are amazing, and then they're going to love coming to work, and we're going to have such a better relationship. So I think that all starts with me being more open about it and us being more open about it at the top, and I'm really proud of all of that.
Yeah, I would say this role doesn't fall on anyone in the org chart. So, be a champion, like any way that I can champion for mental health and advocacy and policy reform and things like that is what I'm passionate about. And it takes people in this room to go do that, whether you're a junior designer or you're a senior executive. And we do have a guide called Beautiful Brains that you can check out that has a bunch of tactical things you can do.
What's the URL?
It's dearmanager.com. Yeah, it's a free guide.
I guess what I'm most proud of is that we have a culture, we've had a culture at the agency in place for a really long time that when tested in the face of an unthinkable tragedy, turn together instead of apart. And it's really, really easy for people to sort of scurry off and turn their backs to each other, but ours is a culture that was already built on a foundation of empathy and love. And so we turned inward, and I think we learned a lot about each other, and I'm proud that we are continuing to keep that alive, and that we are paying close attention to each other, and I hope that never stops. And we'll measure it in lots of different ways, and we'll quantify it and make sure we create stop gaps that it doesn't, but just on a human level that we're able to do that. And I'm definitely doing that training for everybody.
Yeah.
For sure. So I'm going to speak directly to the men who are leaders in the room. I think we tend to be very left-brained. We see a problem, we identify a solution, and we execute. And what I think I enjoy doing, and it's something that I've imbued from the very beginning that I'm going to continue to do, is to make sure that I move away from that a little bit and listen. And create space for dialogue and understanding and empathy. So just maybe move away from the kind of the left-brain solution-oriented approach that we tend to have to a much more human level approach. And I think that'll do wonders.
What about you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the most powerful things I learned was to advocate for myself. I get really anxious, and so I blurt, and I'm not good on the fly. But now I've started saying, I need some time to think about that. I'm an introvert. I have social anxiety, whatever. Can I get back to you by email?
That's smart.
Yeah.
Okay, well, here's to being more human, everyone. Thank you.